Okay, so I guess we should get started then. So first of all, let me guys know if you can hear me. Okay, so seems like sound is good. So yeah, here we go. This is what we're here to do. Screen Rant have the exclusive excerpt preview for the Reckoning of Roku. We've basically been waiting for this for the last month probably. So they've waited until effectively 1 month to go. This is the first day kind of into the kind of the month of Roku to a certain degree. It's, I suppose, ultimately a reasonable time to do it because it's a notable milestone of release. But we're used to getting it obviously quite a bit earlier than this. They definitely don't market these books super well because this is one of the few things they really do to kind of publicize the book at all. Whereas I've been saying in videos that I really do think they should be putting stuff like this, like a second preview chapter, audio excerpts. They should be doing all that stuff on YouTube and not just here's an Instagram story linking an article. That sort of stuff. So yeah, finally we have something to discuss because you'll know that I didn't do a stream last month because nothing basically happened for Avatar really in May. There was some small pieces of news, but there was basically nothing that happened. Now we actually have this, which is a pretty significant preview in the year, but also everything happens kind of all at once. 2 Legend RPG adventures to do. I did record one of my videos. That was the planned video for today about rebels and refugees. That will be tomorrow's video. I basically just have to make the thumbnail for it. But yeah, there's that. There's the next one that we need to do. Storm over Lin Show as well. Then we'll be into probably the build up to Comic-Con, finding out what's happening at Comic-Con. This book's actually going to release. The actual Legends RPG book is going to come out. And then in or around this, the next comic is going to come out. So we've been months without anything, and we're going to get pretty much everything for the year all at once. But that's that. Let's see. I find it weird that Screen Rant gets to premiere the preview. I think Polygon got the preview last year, but I think Screen Rant have done one of them before. I think that's definitely the situation there. Let's see, question. Do we have confirmation that Mike is collaborating or consulting on this one? I'm actually not sure. Let me check here. Probably the Edelweiss listing is probably going to be the best source of information on this. Because it has marketing points. Let me just check this. That's the audiobook. This is this. It's not mentioned, but I'm assuming he's involved somewhere, but probably not as extreme as with the early books. I think it's just Avatar Studios broadly, I think. And that's just the way they're doing it. I still assume that Mike would be someone that they directly talk with about this stuff in the same way that you go to Brian for character design stuff. But these days it's kind of hard to tell because we don't really know beyond Mike and Brian necessarily what they're doing. Tim Hedrick often gets kind of highlighted as one of the writers that will work with the other stuff in Avatar. He consulted on the one-shot comics, but it's swapped with Azula to being Tim Hedrick is the consultant to it's Avatar Studios specifically now. So I think they're just doing the story team type situation. But let's get into this. Like I said in the chat there, I've not read it yet myself. I wanted to wait until I was on stream to actually read it. And then once we read it, we can just discuss it at will for as long as we need to. So yeah, it's an excerpt from chapter 1. Typically, they give you the full chapter, but we'll see what exactly is included here. And then don't forget that we do also have the back of the book little excerpt, small preview on the back of the book that also gives us a little bit of an insight, which we can include in the discussion afterwards as well. But anyway, let's see what we got here. So, Reckoning of Roku reveals an excerpt from Chapter 1, and it is an exclusive, only from a few hours ago. Screen Rant presents an excerpt from the upcoming novel, Avatar The Last Airbender, Reckoning of Roku. It delves into Roku's past, highlighting the friendship with the future Fire Lord Sozin. The book explores Roku's time with the Air Nomads, offering insights into Aang's eventual journey. Interesting. Let's see what they have here. This is probably just marketing stuff for the most part. Obviously, yeah, it can be enjoyed as a standalone entry. You don't need to read the 5 books ahead of time because it's a different Avatar, but it probably helps. It's Roku. Yeah, this is just helping people who aren't super familiar with the lore of Avatar understand that, yeah, Roku's the Avatar before Aang. Lengthy excerpt from the first chapter. It sees a young Avatar Roku living with the Air Nomads and struggling with the teaching methods of his airbending master sister, Daisha. How is everyone pronouncing this name? I've struggled with it since we found it. Thankfully, we're going to get the audiobook same day as the actual book, so that will help. I'm going with, Daisha, I suppose, but I'm not really sure. Let's see. Hints at Roku's ambitions, even if they're loftier than he is prepared to truly enact. And yeah, it releases here. So it can be enjoyed as a standalone entry. Yeah, because they've still yet to confirm that there is a second Roku novel. Now, to be fair, it was the same situation with the Yang Chen books. Until they announced the second Yang Chen book, I don't think we knew there was a second Yang Chen book. I'm pretty sure, wait, was it actually like the week of release of Dawn of Yang Chen was when we found out there was a second one? Because I think he mentioned something in an interview. I think that's the way that reveal actually happened. So I guess we'll find out if Randy Rebay does an interview on week of release or whatever, if they're doing another one. But anyway, let's get into it. Cover. And okay, yeah, here we are. We're straight into the text here. So Roku laced the layer of dried nipa fronds into place to complete the roof, then sat up to survey his work from atop the hut. He was no builder. In fact, his parents had made sure their sons never performed any manual labor. Okay, so there's some interesting reveals already. Like, mentioning an Avatar's parents is kind of significant. Sons. So Roku has a brother? Okay. I guess. For any manual layer, but it looked decent enough. At the very least, it had walls and a roof, whereas it had been a pile of shattered and splintered wood like nearly every structure in the seaside fishing village when he and the Air Nomads arrived almost 2 weeks ago in the wake of one of the most powerful typhoons that had swept over the southwestern Earth Kingdom coast in recent memory. Okay, so southwestern Earth Kingdom coast. So I guess we're in or around, like, kind of Kyoshi Island area here. Chin Village, I guess, is where we're kind of talking about here. Fishing villages, of course, that lines up. So straight away, some interesting details here. Just straight away, this is what the novel offers of just one paragraph, and it's like, Roku has a brother, and all this other stuff. But anyway, they'd all gone silent that day as their sky bison descended through the clouds. The village had been the picture of destruction. Not a single structure remained standing. Debris littered the bay and the crescent-shaped beach. Jagged tree trunks jutted out of the ground like broken spears, while others had been uprooted and strewn across land and sea. The small harbour was destroyed, the boats sunken by the storm, and with them the villagers' livelihood. It was as if some vengeful spirit had dragged a mountainous arm across the coastline. Okay, so he's here with the air nomads doing, I suppose, typical air nomad kind of stuff, helping out nearby kind of areas. And he's involved with this and is doing some kind of active stuff for the first time, I guess. Very different from Fire Nation noble life. The air nomads and the new avatar had come to help. Sky Bison saddles loaded with as much food, clean water, medicine, and other supplies as the great beasts could carry. Roku had spent the summer accompanying them on one such humanitarian trip after another, but hopelessness had overcome Roku when he had taken in the scale of devastation and the work that lay ahead. Okay, so he's already spent the summer being involved with them, so a couple of months, I guess, into his avatar journey, which is more or less, I think, in line with where we thought it was going to be. Why don't they just move elsewhere? He'd ask his airbending master, a short and slight older woman named Sister Daisha, who kept her tattooed head completely bald instead of only shaving the front half like most other air nuns Roku had seen. Okay, so there's the key description for Sister Daisha. Completely bald, okay. Sister Daisha answered patiently as she guided her sky bison, Amra, towards a clearing outside the village. This is a poor village, Avatar Roku. Many of the younger generation have already left to find work in Gaoling or Omashu or other cities, and those who remain do not have the means to start again elsewhere. Even if they did, I doubt they would. Okay, so we get Gaoling reference here, Omashu, so some of the key places. So yeah, the kind of wealthier cities, I guess. People want to go there, and then a lot of people, of course, don't want to do that. That makes a lot of sense. And yeah, another named Sky Bison character. Yes, we cannot kill another one. Yes, of course. Anyone who's read the last book knows the pain of what happened. Why is that? Roku saying this here. This is their home. That, for once, was something Roku understand better than any air nomad. So what will happen when the older generation passes? I suspect so too will the village, Sister Daisha said evenly, catching Roku's look of dissatisfaction. She added, everything in this world is temporary. Okay. You can see a little bit, I suppose, of what they're trying to do there. And so the villagers, with the help of the air nomads and their sky bison, had gotten to work from sunrise to sunset through the late summer heat. They had worked together to clean, clear, carry, bury, repair, replant, rebuild. And what might have taken the villagers months if working by themselves only took a couple of weeks. There was still more to do, but now that the bulk of the reconstruction was complete and the season was ending, the air nomads would return to the Southern Air Temple. Okay, that's pretty nice. The air nomads helping out. Looks good, Sister Daisha said as she floated up to the roof to examine the final portion of work Roku had just completed, hands clasped behind her back. I'm sure this family will be happy to move out of their tent. I would have had time to make many more families happy if you'd taught me any airbending yet, Roku said, then nodded across the way where a young air nomad used her airbending to blow a dozen palm fronds directly into place in a matter of seconds. Okay, nice contrast here. Sister Daisha drifted back to the ground. In order to fly, one must first learn to let go of the ground. Okay, there's a nice quote. That's pretty good. So, because obviously there's a bit of Guru Lahima in that, I suppose, isn't there? Not as extreme, but like the idea of like the start of that kind of philosophy to a degree. Roku sighed and climbed down the bamboo ladder. He wiped the sweat from his brow with the hem of his saffron and yellow robes, retied his hair, and replaced the headpiece Sozin had gifted him. Are we to begin those lessons after we return to the Southern Air Temple? They've already begun. Okay. Roku laughed, but his airbending master kept a straight face. I don't mean any disrespect, Sister Daisha, but all we've been doing is bouncing from one relief mission to the next. I've learned to mend pants, sweep floors, stir stews, wrap wounds, repair huts, distribute supplies, but that's it. Roku swept his arms out in an imitation of a basic airbending motion. Nothing happened. Are those skills insignificant? Of course not, Roku said without conviction, but I'm not here to train to be. Sister Daisha waited for Roku to finish his thought. When he didn't, she prompted, to be what? Roku hesitated. His frustration shoved the answer from his lips. A servant. A look of disappointment crossed the Air Nun's face. Walk with me, Avatar Roku. Okay, so yeah, Roku's kind of walked into a little bit of a trap here, in that, like, this is part of being the Avatar, is doing this, and you understand why he also wants to learn the bending, because that's like the real obvious part of like being the Avatar, is learning all the elements. But you need this kind of foundation as well. So there's that. So yeah, walk with me. They started down the main footpath. People nodded or stared as they noticed the Avatar and his airbending master walking by, and Roku attempted to return their greetings with the expected gravitas. They passed the new huts, the new school, the new temple, the new stalls of the rebuilt fish market, and arrived at the beach where new boats swayed on anchored lines, their bamboo outriggers slapping gently against the water. A group of Air Nomad and Earth Kingdom children ran past, laughing and kicking up sand as they chased a dozen or so turtle ducklings. So there it is. Turtle ducks included here. Very nice. So that's cool. Just to note that, it's like, okay, outside the Fire Nation, we've got some turtle ducks. A light wind stirred the air, and storm clouds hung on the horizon. Hands still clasped behind her back, Sister Daisha watched the waves, and kept watching. Roku crossed his arms and dropped his eyes to the sand, still uncomfortable around open water. Okay, that's interesting. Still uncomfortable around open water, okay. He shifted his weight from foot to foot as he waited for her to speak. He wasn't yet accustomed to the long stretches of silence with which the air nomads peppered their conversations. Nothing else to occupy it, Roku's attention turned to his sore feet, his aching arms, his greasy hair, his empty stomach. How he longed for those post-training hours spent at the royal spa, when he and Sozin would lie back in steaming tubs of water, sipping tea and snacking on fertilized turtle duck eggs, while servants trimmed their nails, brushed their hair, and massaged their shoulders. Once this conversation with Sister Daisha ended, all Roku had to look forward to was a campfire she'd make him light by hand, another meatless meal, and a threadbare bedroll on a hard patch of ground. Okay, so we're getting into the whole idea of the contrast between his noble Fire Nation upbringing, hence why he's friends with the prince, of course, and how very different what he's doing right now is. We haven't got into the full details on the background yet, but there's some of what, of course, goes on when you're friends with royalty, I guess. Patience folding, Roku broke the silence. Why don't we do more? Sister Daisha considered his question. More what? More good. How do you define good? Progress, Roku answered without hesitation this time. Tell me more. As you said yourself, this village is in decline. Despite all the work we've put into its rebuilding, it will disappear with its elders, or with the next typhoon. Sister Daisha didn't disagree. We could establish a fund that each nation could contribute to. Then we can use that money to provide disaster relief and develop struggling villages like this, Roku suggested, trying to sound more confident than he felt. But it was a clever idea, one that his own business-obsessed father, okay, so there's some Roku father information here, business-obsessed father might have come up with. Help them build boats that can compete with the larger fishing vessels from Gaoling. Teach them how to be merchants instead of simply fishermen. Provide loans for those who wish to start new business ventures. Basically, we give those who've left a reason to return, and those still here a reason to stay. In a generation, this could become a bustling port of commerce. Okay, so that seems pretty reasonable. Okay, what's her response going to be? Sister Daisha kept her eyes on the waves, standing a full head shorter than Roku. An interesting plan, but how do you suppose the leaders will feel about using their resources to boost the economies of other nations? Okay, so there we go, I suppose. Given what we know about the Roku era, especially, it's obviously after, it's quite a bit after this, like what, 12 years after this, I think, is when the RPG is set. The nations are very, like, tense-ish with each other. And so something like this doesn't feel like it's potentially possible, necessarily. And as long as we're assisting everyone, I don't think they'd object. So a little bit kind of idealistic here, I suppose. Like, and you wonder, has he met the leaders of the various nations yet? He obviously, I guess, is familiar with who the Fire Lord is, but like, has he met the Earth King and stuff like that yet? What? Roku asked, ready to defend his idea. We are to do this throughout the world then, wherever it is needed. And who will determine where it is needed? We will. You and me? Roku thought for a few moments before landing on the solution. The Council of Elders at each air temple could do so for their regions. I, as the Avatar, could help when needed. Sister Daisha nodded. That's reasonable, but who will manage the funds? Roku faltered as he began to grasp the scope and layers of responsibilities accumulating in his proposed endeavor. Also the councils, I guess. No, wait. What about a group with representatives from each nation? How will the representatives be selected? The Air Nun pressed. Who will choose the proposals? Who will draw up the contracts, train the individuals? Roku didn't have an answer this time. She had made her point. Okay, so just the complexities of trying to get kind of anything done. And this, to me initially, this immediately is like, this gets into kind of like Yang Chen territory of like, everything is complicated, the effort that needs to go in to make anything happen, but she was kind of trying to make stuff happen and often did, but this is quite a broad idea, and yes, she has broke his spirits with her reasoning here, I suppose, to a certain degree. Who will monitor their dealings, audit their accounts, evaluate the impacts upon the human and spirit worlds, settle disputes, deal with those who misuse the funds. Her questions extinguished the nascent pride Roku had felt in his cleverness only moments before. This is why you are not ready to airbend, Sister Daisha said. You have not yet learned to leave the ground. Meaning? Tensing his shoulders. You're still thinking like a fire national. I am a fire national. You're the Avatar, she corrected, with the stinging disappointment of a teacher whose pupil still failed to grasp an obvious lesson. Roku sagged with shame, wondering if she regretted leaving her life at the Eastern Air Temple to train him. That's an interesting one, and the whole idea of, like, you know, conceptually, in a way, like, as the Avatar, like, are you allowed to really claim your kind of home nationality, or like do you really have to almost like push it aside a little bit and be like from all of the nations? And like, it's kind of like, I think you could argue that kind of like either way as the Avatar. Some of the stuff with Karuk, where they kind of got into this a little bit, was kind of interesting, about like him wanting to mix the bending styles and the teachers being like, no, you have to keep them separate. Stuff like that, I think, kind of comes into play here. Sister Daisha placed a hand on his shoulder and softened her tone. If you are to be a good Avatar, you must understand that you are a spirit of no nation. Okay, here we go. A spirit whose sole purpose is to maintain balance within and across the worlds, but you must be patient with yourself. History tells us this has always been a particular struggle for fire avatars. Okay, and then Yazito comes up here. That's an interesting one here, because like this is obviously the flaw with Zito as far as we've been told, but we don't really know the full scope of it necessarily. Like Zito, Roku asked, referring to the last Fire Nation reincarnation of the Avatar. Like Zito, Sister Daisha confirmed, withdrawing her hand. She didn't need to explain further. When Roku had first arrived at the Southern Air Temple, he began to devour every scroll he could find about his past lives. Eager to learn about his new role, Avatar Zito, who had also served as the Fire Lord's Grand Advisor, was revered in the Fire Nation, but the other nations' historians didn't hold Zito in such high regard. Okay, we know this. They believed Zito's official attachment to the Fire Nation wove bias into every institution he helped establish, every protocol he helped craft, every decision he influenced. They warned that this would become more apparent as the years passed, and that the consequences would be disastrous. Roku found this assessment unfair and alarmist, thin on evidence and over-reliant on speculation. So I think that is a fair assessment, I think, so far, the idea of like, it's like, okay, you are worried about this intrinsic connection within the Fire Nation government, but what can you actually confirm he did wrong? That's sort of the idea here, which I think is pretty fair based on what we know, I suppose, prior to reading this. But anyway, we go on. The group of children who had run past them earlier returned, grounding Roku back into the present moment. This time, however, it was the turtle ducklings who were chasing the kids. Still laughing, the children ran into the water as if forgetting their tiny assailants could swim. Sister Daisha laughed. But Roku was unable to brush off his failure so quickly. So how do I learn to do that? To let go of my attachment to my nation? His question was genuine. He wanted to be a good avatar. He just wasn't convinced he had it in him. Her smile widened as she continued to watch the children who were screaming in mock fear as they playfully splashed the advancing turtle ducklings. Go for a swim. Roku raised an eyebrow. A swim? Sister Daisha nodded. You can't be serious, Roku said. Instead of answering, she began to remove her outer robes, revealing the nearly full length of the blue arrow tattoos that ran along her arms and legs, up her back and over the top of her head. Although she still wore her undergarments, Roku averted his gaze. Despite having lived among the air nomads long enough to learn they carried absolutely no shame when it came to their bodies, it hadn't been long enough to unlearn the Fire Nation's sense of propriety, especially when it came to women. Paying Roku no mind, the air nomad folded her robes neatly and set them on the sand next to her feet. Then she ran down the beach laughing. I'll save you, she called to the children, and dove into the water with a gentle blast of air that made the turtle ducklings flutter their wings and quack with annoyance. Roku remained on the shore, envying the way they all moved, as if without a care in the world, as if free. That's interesting there, to end it there, I guess. I guess this is a just context section, but I'll go through it if we need to. I don't know to just like assess that as like, is that just like a random statement at the end, or is there a real kind of like Roku feels he is not free because of a variety of situations? That's interesting. Okay, how it expands on what we know of the world of Avatar. Let's see. Okay, that's just context for who Roku is. The new book offers readers a chance to understand. Okay, 100-Year War is set to recontextualize the conflict. Okay, they just talk about the synopsis. Okay, they just reference what they have in the excerpt, and yeah, so there's nothing particularly in this. Okay, so yeah, we've gone through it there. It's definitely good. Like I think like the writing style is, in my mind, subtly different. Like I don't obviously notice this like giant shift between FCE and what we're reading here from Randy Rabai. I think it reads pretty well, and actually feels quite like similar, I think, in some ways to the way the other books are written. But I think that's probably on purpose, that the style is not going to be like hugely different or anything like that. But yeah, this is interesting. It's obviously, like, they say it's from chapter 1, don't they? Yeah, from chapter 1. I guess we don't know if there's going to be like a prologue necessarily. There might be like that kind of prologue, then chapter 1 style thing. But this is chapter 1, I guess. It feels like there could be more to the opening chapter because they say it's an excerpt from chapter 1. So we'll see what the deal is there. Let's see. The writing style, it lists a lot of things. Yeah, there was definitely like 3 or 4 times where it was like boom, 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 boom. Is that just early on to present a sense of an idea? Well, we'll see. Like, if that continues on for maybe the whole book and it's just like the whole thing, that might be a problem. But I'm guessing it's just part of like the early chapters that they wanted to do that. But anyway, the takeaways here, like there's obviously a lot of subtle little things of like, we're all like, okay, tell us about Roku's like parents and stuff like that. And so they acknowledge that his parents have sons, meaning he has at least a brother, but the implication is that potentially more. We get reference to his father later on in the description then, that he's like very business focused and minded, and so because of that, Roku, I suppose, has some of that in his mind. There's maybe a slight sense of like the freedom bit at the end, like was Roku kind of lacking a certain amount of freedom in the situation that he actually had, and they're kind of almost pointing that out with regards to the whole why can't he airbend. Is it because he's not letting himself be free enough in a way to leave the ground? And the other connection they're obviously trying to make is at the start of his avatar journey here, they want to disconnect him a little bit from I am from the Fire Nation to more being I'm the avatar of the world who happens to come from the Fire Nation, but also should have a connection to the other nations. So there is a lot going on here. But what else do we have here in these early ones? So yeah, reference of his parents, sons, a few references to the life of a noble, I suppose, within the Fire Nation. Air nomads mostly presented as I think we expect them to be, but I suppose leaning into the Roku RPG description of the air nomads, very much suggesting the idea they are quite active in helping the world, setting the stage for they're a bit scattered across the world, so you know the comet would give an opening to destroy them all type thing. But let's see, what else do we have here? Bison references, a scene of a disaster, a typhoon. And then most of it is the kind of Daisha trying to draw moments of teaching from kind of Roku's responses to a lot of stuff here. Like a lot of this stuff is quite interesting. Like the acknowledgement of like, hey, this is what happens to these smaller towns when there is something massive like this that happens. People relocate if they can, and then it's maybe the older people who are left, and inevitably the town might fade into obscurity after that point. And he comes up with a good idea, but the idea requires so much specifics to work, even though it is a good idea. And he's realizing the problem with that. And then Daisha basically kind of alluding to the idea that like the leaders of the nations are not going to agree to like anything to help random people in the future, kind of type thing. So that's interesting. Let's see. Do we know of Roku's noble clan or at least family name? No, we don't. Basically all we know is like the clan stuff is purposefully diminished. That was like the plot of like the Kyoshi stuff, is that the intent as part of the plan was to make it so that the clans have less sort of overall power in the Fire Nation, and it more is on the Fire Lord, which basically should be fully set up at this point. That the implication is almost that Sozin's father is potentially the last Fire Lord who really has to deal with anything related to the clans, but we'll probably get into that, I'm guessing, as we get into the book, because we are expecting to like get the name of Sozin's father, who would be the active Fire Lord at this point. So that's interesting. Crescent-shaped beach. Obviously with Roku, you hear the word crescent and you're like, but it doesn't seem to be here. It just seems village, was it southwestern Earth Kingdom coast. This is where like these novels, it would be nice if they came with a little bit of a map that like hit the key kind of points here. Um, let's see. What about Sozan's sister? Yeah, Zaison. We're expecting her to get a reference somewhere in here for sure. Like, given that we know from this that like Ta Min is apparently like involved in the plot to a certain degree. We don't know really what, but she's involved somewhere in this, which we weren't really expecting. I'm assuming if we're going to get proper Sozin exploration, we can't do that without like acknowledging that he also has like a sister, and actually she's a really interesting character that people want to know more about. I think you do need to set the stage for like basically the RPG stuff happening. She is, I think, more of a character who like it feels like her story requires it to be like set past this point, but you should do some, I think, setup stuff with her, definitely. So yeah. What do we have here? A few Gao Ling references, which is pretty nice. Okay, they're going to return to the Southern Air Temple, which we know we're going to do because we have to get to the introduction of like Gyatso, and it seems like, I'm guessing, we go back to the Southern Air Temple, and I guess Sozin's message is waiting for him, but then, like, are we almost getting the impression that is Sozin going to like actively like be there at the temple rather than just like sending him like a message? That's what I'm kind of not sure about overall. Yeah. What else? What's in the chat? Gowling. Yeah, Gowling is where Toph is from, basically. It's interesting. It's like separated here. Like it's like Gao Ling. Whereas I think before this we were always like one word Gao Ling, but it's one of those ones where like I'm almost like, oh yeah, how did we know that? Because they never say it in the show. I'd have to like source like where the name specifically came from. I'm guessing it's like old Nickelodeon website kind of type thing. It sounds like the sort of thing where like, oh yeah, random place that we happen to know. I think it's been referenced in other material as well, but again, I'd have to check all my sources on that. So, okay. He hasn't done any airbending yet. Though, interestingly here, he hasn't even... It's not that he's tried and failed at the airbending training. It's that the airbending training hasn't even started yet. So that is interesting. Whereas like the description almost implies that like, oh, he's tried and failed. But philosophy wise, it seems like he's not there yet with airbending, and she's like, I'm not going to start until you're open and have the chance at even doing it. That's the situation there. In order to fly, one must let go of the ground. And I guess as we go through this, like she frames it as primarily you are stuck in a like Fire National view of things, and you need to there's that. Oh yeah, Gao Ling, yeah, Runes of the Empire, yeah. I just have to remember, like, yeah, like, did they actually say the name of it? Like, because there's so many like Avatar things where they do forget to do that. I think quite a lot. Like, okay, we're here, we're in this place. Are we actually going to name it? Because like again, like that's the point. Like I said, is that like all the top episodes and like we don't actually name it within those episodes, but we know now. Okay, yeah. Let's see. Okay, you have to reference this, of course. The headpiece Sozin had gifted him. So he took it off to do the work and then put it back on afterwards. I guess he's just keeping it safe, that sort of thing. This is interesting. Like, yeah, he gets to the whole idea of like, why aren't we focusing on my training? Why am I basically doing servant work? He's trying to say it in a nice way. I think you get the point that he's trying to make, but she's trying to point out that like the fact that you still feel that way is kind of why we haven't moved on. You have to fully separate yourself from the idea that you're like a Fire Nation noble and be like, okay, you're still a celebrity in the world because you're the Avatar, but the Avatar is sort of meant to be like a servant to the world to a certain degree, so he has to embrace that kind of side of things. And yeah, this actually is quite interesting, like given what they go for here, because the RPG, the way it presents Roku as like a fully realized avatar, is that he is notable as an avatar for being an avatar who embraces and truly understands like the uniqueness of each individual nation. That's why he is very much the four nations should remain four in the era before they've started to really heavily cross over, because he really understands what each of them are actually about. And that's the whole idea of he ends up being kind of unique among the avatars that we're somewhat familiar with, because he actually did the typical training where he goes to each of the nations and doesn't have like a more kind of quick path or a different path where he only discovered he was the avatar at this point. Him being like the standard avatar is kind of unique in a way. Let's see, what else do we have here? Turns their greetings, of course. All the new stuff that they've built. Air Nomad children interacting with Earth Kingdom children. So I suppose that's kind of an interesting one in that like they bring like a lot of the kids with them as well. That's kind of interesting. They don't just bring people to sort of like do the work. That's interesting. Yeah, this is interesting. Like, is this going to be as simple as he can't swim and so doesn't like the water, or is there going to be like a trauma around water? Because like she references like, let's go for a swim, and it's not like he panics. He's just like, really, what are we doing? So that's kind of the thing here. Is it just like, hey, I want you to do something where you step outside your comfort zone, as in like you just don't know how to swim because you're a Fire Nation noble, or is this a real problem? Well, we have to wait and see, obviously. What else do we have here? Yeah, the stuff that I suppose Roku and Sozin do together, that's interesting. Post-training hours, so he still does training, of course, because he's basically a master firebender, obviously. Royal Spa, okay. Lie back, steaming tubs of water, sipping tea, snacking on fertilized turtle duck eggs. Servants trimmed their nails, brushed their hair, massaged their shoulders. And again, like we've seen bits and pieces of this with like Azula, with Zuko. So we know that this is the royal treatment, obviously. And they're going for the contrast here. And then, yeah, what do we do? More good. He wants to help. That's a key point. So it's he has aspects of like the kind of like the kind of stuck up noble maybe a little bit, but he does care, I suppose, is the key point in all of this. He's not the super hardcore leaning into the noble thing. It's just it's a big change for him, obviously. Here's his big suggestion, which is actually pretty well thought out. Like, usually the way that these type of scenes go is that the idea is like almost idealistic to the extreme, but at least Roku has thought of like a bunch of things, even if he hasn't accounted for everything, as kind of Daisha kind of points out. So yeah, that's a good comment actually. That like it's not that he has an issue with water for sure. Where am I gone here? Yeah, because he doesn't mind lying back in tubs of water or anything like that. So that's fine. It's just open water for whatever reason. That's interesting. And then yeah, here's her kind of picking it apart, but I think she does it in a way where it is more of a teaching thing rather than your idea is bad. So, like, I don't think there's too much criticism of Daisha here. I think she does the right job at kind of teaching him of like, okay, here's where you need to be a little bit more realistic about this, and what you haven't thought of ultimately. Yeah, this is kind of key, yeah. How do you suppose the leaders will feel about their resources being used to boost economies of other nations? And this is kind of like a big assumption here. And this is where, like I said, when I was reading through it, I would really like to know which of the world leaders he has met and which he hasn't. And if this is coming from a place of like, does he in any way like understand? Like, does he think that, like, oh, I know Sozin's father. He would help with this. I know the leaders of the air temples. They would help with this. But you are not factoring in water tribe leaders or potentially the Earth King in this. Maybe that's what. And given that we're expecting the Earth King to be the main kind of like source of conflict, because we basically know the character from the RPG, that's very, very interesting. So, yeah, all about the funds and stuff like this, who would do the training, all these details here. You have not learned to leave the ground. What do you mean? You're still thinking like a Fire National. That's kind of like, I suppose, key to, I suppose, early Roku, given what he will go on to kind of become. Just read his description in the RPG. Basically, you're the Avatar. She's from the Eastern Air Temple. That's again a detail that's important to note. You're a spirit of no nation. You have to keep balance across the world. You must be patient with yourself. Okay, so that's good. And then I do like this. Like, they imply it goes further than just Zito here, which I think is kind of interesting. Like, it's always been a case for fire avatars, which I guess does make sense ultimately. But another example would have been nice, I think, here. But I get it. Zito is still a character we don't know that much about, so further kind of exploration of this is kind of definitely needed. So he specifically is interested in what's going on with the other past lives. So yeah, there's not really much extra detail on Zito that they present here. It's more of just, I think, where most fans have got to with Zito, they sort of present here of like, well, the Fire Nation presentation of him is probably a little bit biased, but the counterpoint of that criticism is probably biased in the other direction. The reality of it is like, okay, he focused on the Fire Nation, but did he over-focus on them? Like, what did he not do for the other nations? That's always sort of, I think, been the point. And then, as Roku kind of mentions, it's like, it's a bit alarmist, isn't it? Like, is this true? In what way? Like, what did he set up that is inherently Fire Nation specific that would, like, give a bias towards the Fire Nation? They're, like, if you treat this as being correct, it's like, is it meant to be subtle setup for, like, here is a very subtle way in which the Fire Nation had the advantage and was able to do what they did during the 100-Year War, basically, is that a lot of these systems were created by Zito, and they did have Fire Nation bias built into them. I'm not really sure. Like, I think they would have to explore this a little bit more. That's an interesting thing. Every institution, protocol, every decision he influenced, they're trying to say, was biased towards the Fire Nation. You need specifics here to, I think, properly have the debate, but interesting. Are we going to get more on Zito or maybe other avatars? I would definitely like that. And there's definitely room to, I think, do it. If we're trying to try and make Roku into like what seems to be the case, maybe the first Fire avatar in a while, who specifically managed to avoid the accusations of being focused on his home nation. That could be interesting. But you also wonder, like, is this where maybe he goes in the other direction and maybe doesn't focus as much on the Fire Nation, which is what allows Sozin to kind of do what he does, kind of in secret, and who knows. Turtle ducks. Let's see. Yeah, lack of confidence. He wasn't convinced he had it in him to be a good avatar. Yeah, because there are at least a couple of female Fire avatars. Yeah, the quote unquote one that doesn't have any arms but actually does have arms, but we just go with the idea that that's the name. That would be nice to get. Let's see, go for a swim. Fire Nation sense of propriety, of course. Interesting. And then, yeah, he remained on the shore, envying the way they all moved, as if without a care in the world, as if free. Interesting. So wait. A swim. You can't be serious. Okay, so he stays back. He doesn't immediately go to do it. And then, yeah. I think there's something with this that's kind of interesting. As if free. What do we mean by this? Like, in what way is he not free? I suppose, does he feel locked into this path that he's not free? The path has been set out for him because he was discovered as the Avatar, and he feels like there's an inherent lack of freedom with that because he was kind of taken away from his Fire Nation life. He has to do this now. That could be interesting. And then, there's also a little bit of the May didn't have any freedom. Is there the family noble expectations on him, which you assume that would be sort of met because like it must be a great honor for his family that one of their children is the Avatar. I'm assuming that would be a great honor for a Fire Nation family. So that shouldn't necessarily be it, unless the father was like, no, I don't want you to, I don't like the idea that you're the Avatar because you need to be the next businessman in the family. I think we need to get into that a little bit more. So that's interesting. And yeah, let's go back up to that section here where it's mentioning his father's business kind of acumen. Okay, so I think it's in around here, isn't it? Yeah, his own business obsessed father might have come up with. Interesting. Okay. business obsessed father. So I don't know. Like they definitely need more. We need more information to go on to kind of make anything, I think, of this in regards to like Roku and a lack of freedom potentially. This is definitely where I think we need to see, I suppose, more of the true Roku come out, and I think we'll see that more when he interacts with the characters that are in or around his age. So when he talks to Sozin again, when Gyatso comes into play, if we have scenes with him talking to Ta Min, I'm not sure. So there's that, and then let's go back up to the start again. He was no builder. His parents have made sure their sons never performed any manual labor. There's no suggestion of like issues necessarily with his parents, other than like, okay, what exactly does the freedom thing mean? What's going on with his thing about water? But the mentions of his father is kind of like, okay, he was a businessman. Roku knows some business kind of approaches because of that. We haven't quite got into the idea that like expectations are in place, but why is he lacking in confidence? I get like the Avatar, of course, like it's a crazy thing. Like, will I be a legend like everyone before me? That's a kind of crazy thing that a lot of avatars must feel. But the emphasis on him definitely is like there seems to be a kind of pretty big lack of confidence about like, can he do anything in a way? So I don't know. That's interesting. But yeah, like the fact that like he has brothers, I think, is actually just super interesting. The water, like, did something happen to the brothers? I don't know. Who knows? You almost think like if something pretty tragic must have happened, there'd be maybe more of a connection to the whole typhoon thing. Whereas it does more come across as if he just has the correct, like, expected response to arriving to clear up a place devastated by a natural disaster, rather than like, this reminds me of something that happened to my family. Let's see. Roku's father could be a big weapons contractor that manufactures Sozin's invasion fleet in the future. Yeah, that is one thing that I suppose needs to maybe be set up, is that like, oh yeah, like the big industry, like who is the manufacturer of those things, and that is a pretty big business kind of venture. It's, I don't think we have enough information to jump to that straight away, because we're just like, Roku's father, business, the war. Like, I get it, but like, we have to wait and see, obviously. So, yeah, that's that. I suppose we could talk about this. I know I did it in a video, but I suppose we can do the more live stream reaction to the back of the book. Obviously, this is later on, because I guess he's maybe had a little bit of airbending training now, because it's mentioned like Sister Daisha breathe. Big question is obviously like, how does he get stuck in Earth? That's a pretty big one. We know, obviously, the big dispute, based on the description, is Fire Nation, Earth Kingdom, over a fire island. Has he been, like, has he been encased by earthbenders here? That's the big question here. And then, yeah, was Ta Min okay? What's he doing? What's so desperate that he needs to get back to Ta Min? And this then gets into, how is he alerted to the fact that there is a mission? So if we open up the description here, it's like, okay, his friend Sozin requests his aid. Okay. Then the newer description, Oh yeah, yeah. Because let's not forget this. Sozin doubts him. So that can't be good for like. I almost forgot this from the description. Is that like, oh yeah, we have this as well, but though we don't know who says this. Yeah, there's actually some stuff when you go back to like now that we have a little bit of context from having some text, the description has a few more things to it. Which of the two, Roku or Sozin, is saying this? Sozin has doubts about Roku. Roku has doubts about himself. Then there's months of training, so I guess there's a bit of a time skip, maybe, or they I suppose they get around it with basic principles rather than anything like that. I suppose a principle of airbending is what he's struggling with, and it's just that they haven't actually started the training because she doesn't think he will do it. But anyway, he requests the Avatar's aid. Okay. He's advised to decline. So it's not only told to Roku, it's a public official thing that she hears about. And that's where Gyatso comes into play. And then, yeah, what's going to be disaster that affects the world. And there we go. I knew I recognized that line from somewhere. To be a spirit of no nation. It's a direct quote from Sister Daisha that we have from the excerpt that we have here. Even if the lesson comes at great personal cost. So, this to me feels like it's a dispute between Fire Nation and Earth Kingdom, but Roku is probably going to have to side with the Earth Kingdom in it and realize that as the Avatar, he will have to go against his own nation sometimes and against Sozin. So that could be interesting if that's the approach that they take with it. It's interesting because the Earth King, apparently of this era, is a bit of a menace, but I suppose he could be right about this tail end, Fire Island, maybe being closer to the Earth Kingdom than the Fire Nation, but we have to wait and see. So, that's interesting, but yeah, back to this. Could he enter the Avatar state? No. But yeah, where does Tom-in come into play? What I said in my video, and I think it's the only thing that to me makes sense, is obviously there's a dispute over the island. I'm guessing whatever family or clan Tom-in is from, her family maybe is involved leading the Fire Nation side of this dispute in some way, and something happens to her because of that, and he might want to get involved to a certain degree, but then this is what prompts him to do it without permission from anyone, is that he needs to save Tom-in, even if it's super, super risky. That seems interesting. The Lives of the Avatar is a book, of course, we all want to read. Again, the lack of confidence presented here. And then Gyatso gets him out. You're welcome. Yeah, I don't think the intent here is that Roku does anything. I do think the point here is that Gyatso gets him out. But interesting. Obviously, other previews. There should eventually be an Amazon preview that goes up that could be quite a different section of the book. They don't tend to do a thing where there are like multiple other chapters. We will get an audio preview, but I'm pretty sure that will be like a minute, and it could be from absolutely anywhere in the book out of context. I think a few of the audio previews have been rather random sections of the book, but still, that is something that we probably should be getting over the next week or two, so be on the lookout for that. So there's that. Is there a map for the Roku era by any chance? Let's see here. If I open up, I think it's this. Where's the map? Yeah. this is the best map we have. The numbers in red are Roku era specific icons, basically. So we have, up in the north, we have Chen Bao, and there's a conflict here in this era. And then 18, which looks like it could be the potential like thing going on here. And I think a lot of people ask the question, is this book about Natsuo Island? Because that's number 18, which is very close to the Earth Kingdom. Otherwise, like, we don't really have a lot of context for what's going on here. I think everyone who has read the RPG acknowledges that the visuals when it comes to map stuff should be like a lot better than it is right now, because this is missing like a lot of key stuff. Like, there's only 2 Roku points of interest going on here, but yeah, so we expect, like, we're going to be down here, Southern Air Temple. We're somewhere probably here, based on what they say. Like, it's a southwest Earth Kingdom fishing village, I guess. So what are we doing with here? So, like, what, 15 is Kalau Mountain Range, 21 is Omashu, 12 is Foggy Swamp, 13 is Gaoling. So they're mentioning the idea of, like, people going to Gaoling and also Omashu. So it probably is somewhere in or around here that, like, is what they're talking about. That's why those are the 2 places to go to. So there's that. So yeah, they need to cover that. And then I suppose we should probably address some of this stuff as we go through this. Roku era. Just in case you guys haven't seen this. How far into this have I gone? Okay, yeah, Roku era. Now, obviously, we're talking, like, I think this is 12 years after where this book is going to be set. But we get the whole idea here. Yeah. Through his travels, Roku learned many things about the world. He saw how unique each nation was and how their peace was held together by fragile threads. He learned what it was like for people living in poverty and realized what his privilege afforded him in his youth. Traveling the nations wasn't just about learning the elements for Roku, it was about understanding the world and his important duties as the Avatar. So we are going to get to see Roku kind of, I suppose, take on that approach ultimately. They're more thematic things. We're expecting this to have happened already, or it will happen, but, like, the idea is, like, this is a thing that is happening. I'm guessing because they're implying a few months have passed, this has happened already, the Night of Silent Sages. And the Earth King Jailoon is a key character. Like, we expect that name to come up in this book in terms of who the current Earth Kingdom leader is. This obviously tells us that basically is the case. He is the Earth King that we will see in the book, and this event has literally just happened. This is why it's going to be kind of weird if, like, Roku's forced to, like, ally or, like, side with the Earth Kingdom in this dispute, but we'll see what goes on here, of course. The whole Chen Bao thing here obviously is more of a 12 years into the future, this will become a thing. Dragon hunts in the future. Unity will be in the future, of course. Princess Zaysan, of course, we know is an important character. But yeah, like, just for some context, I suppose here, Fire Nation in this era is generally stable and more or less united. Internal conflicts like the Camellia Peony War of the Kyoshi era haven't stricken the nation for decades. So if you're wondering about, like, clan stuff, they highlight here decades, and we're only 12 years before in this book. So, it's been a good few years since the last time the clans really were up to no good, effectively. So that is not really going to come into play, to the point where I would kind of be surprised if they overly explained what clans people are from. I'm guessing they're just going to say noble family and just kind of leave it at that in a lot of cases, like they have with Tylee and May so far. The Fire Nation has spent decades focusing on internal matters, and with a new Fire Lord on the throne, the people have begun to look beyond their borders. So I guess Sozan's father has very much focused on the Fire Nation, is sort of the idea that they're going for here. So we'll see, I guess maybe Sozan be the one to hey, my father does not focus on what's going on with the other nations. I think that's a problem, and that might be a problem. The Fire Nation's burgeoning outward interest is represented in a number of ways. They're focused on developing faster and better forms of transportation to bring the rest of the world closer than ever. Sozan jump-started his nation's development of coal-powered vessels and created hundreds of jobs for the poorest members of society, building his great fleet. So Sozan is the one who makes that happen. Just if anyone potentially wondering about that maybe being a plot point, it could still involve Roku's family, potentially, but I'm not quite sure that that's maybe the intent here. Because obviously we're probably a few years away from seeing him ascend to the throne. Zaysan, of course, pretty important character. I suppose the question is I'd have to probably read this stuff again. Do we know how long ago the training happened? Because I think I'd need to read every bit of Zaysan information in detail to find out how it's referenced. Of was this a good few years ago or literally last couple of years? Okay. Will we get more Yuyan stuff, I wonder? That kind of seems to be a random subtle thing they're trying to do in some of the books, is referencing Yuyan stuff, but might be a bit of a stretch to kind of get that stuff. The Air Nomad stuff, given what we were just talking about, the excerpt is kind of quite Air Nomad focus. Of course, we're expecting some of these characters to probably maybe be there, because Chondro should be in or around the Southern Air Temple during this point, and there's a chance Ryo-shan maybe makes an appearance. If we're going to get name drops of characters, Eudron is going to be an elder at one of the temples, so a lot of these characters, think about these names, of course, is sort of the idea. I'm guessing the ages, we would see a teenage Chondro, I guess, in the same way that we're seeing a teenage Gyatso here, whereas here, I suppose for Gyatso characterization, let's see, Roku comes to Gyatso for practical advice or a fresh perspective when he's feeling dour. Gyatso remains neutral in the conflict and internal debates about whether the Air Nomad should become more isolationist or continue embracing the world. That is it's something that they're facing. So that's interesting. He believes diversity amongst his people is a good thing, and internal debate eventually leads to fruitful progress no matter the decision. To that end, he encourages the temples to discuss and debate one another. Okay. So I'm guessing we'll see some of this side of Gyatso as we kind of go through. But Guiding Wind, we might see the early stages of this potentially, and then that is going to be a thing. Zaysan, Sozan, by the way the Fire Nation have been doing things for a while now, will be pitted against each other. So if we do get to see Zaysan, it's you have to remember it's under that kind of context. So hope we do get to see her, though. That is going to be quite important. And then yeah, Tom in. Like I do come out of this kind of feeling like how involved is Sozin going to be? Because like the article was talking about how it's going to really delve into Sozin, but like the description kind of gives the impression that like Sozin asks Roku to go on a mission and Roku goes on a mission. There's not necessarily to me the implication that like Sozin will be there throughout the book, unless there is a whole section where we have chapters where we are Sozin point of view or Zaison point of view back in the Fire Nation while Roku is on the mission. Or are we actually getting Roku, Sozin, and Gyatso on the mission, which is not necessarily the way I read the descriptions. So I'm interested to see how much Sozin we do or don't get in this book. I guess we'll get Sozin from Roku's point of view, because like best friend obviously, but are we actually going to get Sozin? Feels kind of important because he's like the villain of the franchise basically. Like this is a super important thing to do as well. Highlighting his friendship, like, okay, we knew that was the case. You don't know if they've read the book yet, like there's that sort of stuff as well. Yeah, and there's that, yeah, the 306 that says that Sozin and Roku didn't see each other for years. Yeah, pretty sure that's the case, which is why I'm kind of like, unless they're going with the idea here that they're getting around that by going, actually, I met you again weeks into your training, and then I didn't see you again, as like the slight retcon around the situation. But I also do think that there is the potential that like it is separate here, and there are scenes where we get Sozin's perspective in that way, or Roku just communicates with Roku by letter, basically. That's another kind of key point. Let's see, is Roku the youngest, eldest, middle sibling? Yeah, that's a key thing as well. And this is where like I hope the book has the time to do all that stuff, because I want to get a lot of information on his life prior to his training, because while I think all the avatars are going to have sort of unique trainings and stuff like that, I do think it can get a little stale where we're just always dealing with a teenage avatar making the next step in progress, where actually I kind of want to know just the kind of more day-to-day stuff with Roku in the past life versus his new life as the avatar. Oh yeah, and that's actually a good point as well. Yeah, I wonder what the last years of Kyoshi's life like. Yeah, because like Kyoshi's legacy is a relatively recent thing in the world, and because she's like effectively like the oldest ever avatar as far as we're aware, that's a huge thing. That like we've ended a giant era of Kyoshi, where she apparently kept peace for like the last 100+ years of her life potentially, and we're now into like tensions beginning to rise once again in the new era. I wonder, will they address like what way is Kyoshi thought of, given that some people are going to literally remember like potentially speaking with a 200+ year old Kyoshi, and what that was like, what that means. Because a lot of us wonder like, what on earth did she look like when she was like 229 years old or something like that, 230? That will be interesting if they delve into that at all, because we want to know that. Yeah, Sozin POV point of view chapters. Feels like we have to get them. We've had stuff like this before. Like we've done stuff from other characters' perspectives in other books. Maybe not as many of them. And like say maybe the Yang Chen book maybe could have used some more focus on some of the other characters. Like I think Chai Si could have probably done with a couple more chapters. But yeah, we've done it with Janju, Yoon in Shadow of Kyoshi had some chapters to himself. Kavik effectively did have some chapters that were kind of just him doing his thing primarily. And in this book, you kind of wonder, like, are we going to get Gyatso focused chapters? Maybe a little bit here or there, but what you want, I think, is Sozin and what's going on in the Fire Nation. I think more so. But let's not forget, like, Gyatso is actually going to be a really cool character to see get the kind of first member of Roku's Team Avatar treatment. That's like a big thing. So that will be interesting to see. But then I think speaking a bit broader, it's like, yeah, Roku's Team Avatar, he doesn't meet, if we consider Takokak to be a member of his Team Avatar, he's not going to meet him until like years after this. So it kind of feels like the next book does need to time skip depending on what we do here. Yeah. And yeah, just because it's Sozin, like, it's not just random friend of the Avatar. It's Sozin. Like, I think they know they have something important, and that needs to be a focus just as much as anything. To see young Sozin in comparison to what we know he becomes, all of that stuff, I think we need to get into. So definitely we need to get that. But yeah, I think that's like pretty much everything there is to talk about for the most part. Let's see. Imagine Sozin's POV chapters will be mostly on the political intrigue between his father and Earth King Jailun, and Roku POVs will be about the mission and Gyatso. Yeah, that is the big thing there. It's like, yeah, we kind of do need to get into the kind of political intrigue, but it does seem like Roku is going to be unaware of it until he suddenly finds out the truth on the mission, whereas Sozin, I guess, will be more in the weeds involved in it. Because there's also the sense for, like, is Sozin asking Roku, like, on behalf of his father, or does he go behind his father's back to ask for Roku's help? And is this like, my father doesn't want to do anything about this, so I will? Because, as we went over in the RPG, was his father too focused specifically on the Fire Nation and not enough on interacting with the other nations? And that's something Sozin is focused on. We have to wait and see. But yeah, in terms of, like, I suppose other videos I'll have coming up, as I said at the start, I've already recorded. It's actually already uploaded. I just need to do some final, like, stuff with the thumbnail and stuff like that. Rebels and Refugees, the Legends RPG adventure. I did a video on that, and that will be released tomorrow. So going over that, if you weren't able to get it for Free RPG Day on Saturday, I'll go over that. It's an interesting little adventure. Obviously, pretty big gulf between novel information and then what the adventures actually are, but there's some cool little bits and pieces in them. Storm over Linshow, I'll get to later in the week. I only have had a chance to very, very briefly look over what it's about. I need to definitely read it in full, but I'll get to that later on in the week. Hopefully at some point the audio excerpt drops that I can cover that in a video. And then SDCC speculation. That will be another video I probably will need to do at some point, because I'm guessing at some point in the next probably 2 weeks we'll find out what is and isn't happening at Comic-Con. I'm assuming we're going to get a Braving the Elements podcast panel and a publishing panel like usual. I'd be stunned if they did an Avatar Studios panel. But I do think the door is probably open a little bit for them to drop a bit of Avatar Studios news. But I don't think it's going to be huge. But I feel they could give us something because we've kind of started the news. Let's see, am I planning an early review for Bounty Hunter and the Tea Brewer? No, I sent in the request like I usually do, and I didn't get it this time. It just happens sometimes. I would have done it because I'm pretty sure like it's like the request went up like 2 months ago, I think. So like if I had got approved, it would have been like a super early review, like literally like pretty much 4 months before release. But for whatever reason, it didn't get approved this time, so that's why I don't have an early review for the comic. So yeah, I'm gonna have to wait until release date, like everyone. But it's fine. It's fine. The only problem is just like I'll be right in the middle of the Roku novel coverage, trying to do the chapter videos, and the comic's going to drop pretty much in the middle of that because it comes out like within 2 weeks of the novel coming out. And then like Comic-Con is in there as well. I think Dragon Prince, the next season, comes out in or around that time period as well. I think it's end of July as well, and I do want to at least do a little bit of coverage on that. I'm not sure how many videos I'll do for that. Who knows? Like, are Magpie going to drop the Iroh Adventure Guide book in or around Comic-Con as well? There's a real chance there's like a massive overload of stuff that happens kind of end of July into August, which I'm a little bit concerned about because like May would have been a good month for any of these things because nothing happened, but it's all going to be July and August, isn't it? That's just the way it is. And then it's going to be like 4 to 6 months probably until the next thing, realistically, because they never seem to schedule them effectively over the course of the year. Because like we don't know when the Mako comic is coming out. I'm assuming they have to say something at Comic-Con about what the deal is there. Let's see, I hope they announced the date for the Mako Bolin comic at SDCC. We don't have a date yet, right? Yep, no date. They specifically did not really say when it was coming out when they like announced it at New York Comic Con last year. But we had a date from before. Like, it was meant to be a 2023 book. Then we assumed it was meant to be a 2024 book. But we're at the point now where if it hasn't been announced this month yet. So if they announce it for next month, it's realistically coming out in December. If not, it's coming out in 2025. That realistically, I think, is the way it has to work, unless they've held back announcing a date and it actually is a little sooner. But that will be unexpected, realistically. I don't know what Dark Horse is doing with some of this stuff. We obviously know why it's been delayed at this point, and it's one of those ones where, like, you know, it happens. It's different than the weird, like, stuff happens behind the scenes and the book has just been randomly pushed back, like Bounty Hunter and the Tea Brewer. Like, why is it out in August compared to May? That's a little bit of a, like, I'm not sure what happened there. Whereas at least with this book, it's like, okay, the artists had a bad year, slow progress. That's a very understandable delay. But it took her coming out to say that, which I appreciate that she, you know, gave us that information. And then, yeah, Beast of the Four Nations. Are they actually going to say anything about it? I don't know, because what do they announce at the panel for comics? They have to announce the date for the Mako comic. I just feel like if they don't mention it here, then I'm guessing it's like way off. Like it's probably mid to late next year if they don't announce it at Comic-Con this year, realistically. Um, I think they pretty much have to announce what the next Avatar comic is, like the sixth one shot is, and that is going to be relatively exciting. Um, I'm I'm interested to see what character they pick, or characters, because obviously we got June and Iroh, so there's the option for these kind of team up kind of comics as well as going back to solos. Um, hmm. Let's see. Next I Am book. So yeah, we have Toph coming out starting next year, and then we're looking for whatever the fifth I Am book is. I'd like to see them do Korra. Um, it'd be cool if they did Sokka, but like I would worry that having 5 books about like the 5 Team Avatar members might be a little bit repetitive. But one more is it could work. But we'll see. Um, Spirit World RPG book. Yeah. They said they're still working on it. I'm guessing it's the next book, but they're on a schedule where it's basically like one a year, releasing in the summer. So unless they change up what's happening, um, that's an interesting one. Let's see. Alexandra Monique made a post recently implying that she sent the final art comics for the colorist, so hopefully it will have a date soon. Oh, that's interesting. Let's see what she said specifically. Uh, hmm. Hmm. The last one where she specifically mentions it is like she makes a post saying like, "Well, if I don't mention Mako and Bolin, wait, sorry, if I don't see Mako and Bolin fan cams with my comic drawings after this is done, I'm making my own because I'm pretty happy with some of these." So I don't know. It was June 9th, so I'm guessing based on the way that was worded, it's like, oh, like I finally finished the comic. I'm really happy with a lot of these now that it's done. Yeah, I haven't found the other one yet. But yeah, something like that. Anyway, let's see. What other future novels would you like to see? Um, I'd like to see anything that's a little bit like different. Like, it's to the point now where I do feel like even a novel just about an avatar who's like an adult, like an avatar in their like 30s, 40s, 50s or something like that, rather than just teenage avatar, it would be unique. But obviously some of the other stuff, like I think I've said it in videos myself, yeah. The incident that led to the formation of the Southern Water Tribe as just a big world building event, what led up to it, who were the key characters involved, that sort of thing. I'd like to see that happen. I'd like to see how they do a book that doesn't specifically focus on an avatar, and just how that would work, because I think we're so used to like pretty much anything we get being focused on an avatar. You almost wonder how it would be accepted if we got something where it's not really involving an avatar, or it's only minorly involving an avatar. And that's kind of a similar thing with Avatar Studios projects, where we maybe expect something like that to happen. And then, yeah, there's a lot of stories. Like, some of them feel like they might be more comic focused. I'd like to see a bit more spirit style thing. That would be kind of interesting. Red Lotus could work as a novel, definitely, depending on what they do. Just more stuff. I think they need to get to a situation where it's not just kind of one series of books. Like, I'd like to see them be able to do like a one-off book about this thing, or a separate series of books on something else. There's a lot of options for Avatar novels specifically, because it seems like they're able to potentially do a little bit more than what we've even seen the animation do. Though I suppose with Avatar Studios, we're not even sure anymore what limitations maybe there are or are not, depending on what projects they're coming out with there. That's the situation. But yeah, just more stuff, I think, is pretty good. That's definitely where I'm kind of leaning towards right now. Just because, like, it's been enough years now where I'm kind of like, Avatar Studios has been in place. I think we should be able to get to a situation where we can handle 2 novels coming out in a year, 2-3 comics coming out, and other stuff. Whereas at the moment, it almost feels like a bit of a struggle for them to get 1 comic, 1 book out in a year, and that's really about it. It's like, look at where we are now. Like, we're halfway through the year, and we're only now just about getting to stuff, and it's been a pretty big gap since the last big stuff. Series of novels, big book, animated short. I think just a series of novels. Like, I'd like to maybe see what they do if it's not YA novel, but just it's a novel. How they'd go with that. And just, yeah, like, here's a 4-book series or something like that, where they can dive into something for a little bit longer. I'd kind of like to see that happen. Because, again, the formats can get a little bit stale when you stick with it, like, for too long. Like, Chronicles of the Avatar, like, are we for sure doing 2 books on each avatar? That's it. Can we come back to Kyoshi if we want to? Like, I think people would like to see more Kyoshi. Yang Chen, the way it ended, felt like you could have easily done a 3rd book, but we didn't. And a lot of those questions kind of come up of, like, are we ever going to come back to them? It's sort of the same as the Azula situation, where it's like, we got this book, it's cool, but what's next? Is there a plan? What are we doing? What's the significance of this in the big picture? We're looking to see that. And that's where, if they ever were to do, like, here is a series of novels about a brand new avatar you've never heard about before, but, like, right in the middle, where, like, it's not connected to any recent avatars, and it's far enough away from Wan where it's not super connected to him, and it's just, you can do pretty much anything you want to do. with this Avatar, this is the novel Avatar, and the only thing you have to avoid are like big picture world building moments that shape the world. Stuff like formation of a Southern Water Tribe, you know, when Bossing, say, switched from being an underground city to being an overground city with the big walls, that sort of thing. That's the kind of point there. Yeah, like I just think there's room. They can easily do more novels if they kind of have to. Like, this is really exciting, but I also think there's a lot of excitement also because it's basically going to be like nearly a year since the last piece of content that we had, because of the way the productions are going on a lot of these stuff. Like, we do tend to get everything in a couple of month period in the year, then we're left waiting for like 6+ months for the next kind of drop of everything, and it could be spread out a little bit more. And that's where like a second novel that maybe hits at the complete opposite kind of season of the year would be kind of nice to have, just to give us something in like January would have been really nice, I think. Definitely. But, you know, that's what we're doing here. And I know, at least this year, we also have the Cabbage Merchant book. I'm not expecting anything huge from that, but I think it should be at least fun, because it's like a picture book, at least trying to do something new. But we'll see what that's like when it actually comes out. But yeah, there'll be Avatar videos definitely coming out. Like I said, Rebels and Refugees video tomorrow. Later on in the week, I'll do Storm Over Lynn show. Unless other news drops, basically, yeah, I'll do Storm Over Lynn show at that point. And then, yeah, we'll see what happens with regards to SDCC news and everything else as well. Because still have to cover, like, you know, Star Wars Acolyte episodes, and eventually get around to doing some Dragon Prince stuff. And yeah, whatever else happens. And then, oh yeah, when I Am Katara comes in, still waiting on my copy. I'll do a video on that whenever it arrives. Let's see. Would it be cool to have a story set during the 100-Year War that is similar to Rogue One and/or Halo Reach, Band of Brothers? Yeah, I think it would be. I think there's definitely room to do something like that. If you have a really good story that you think can work, and it's like well written and kind of has a big meaning to it, I think definitely you can make any story work. It's just about, I think when you do a story and it's not like inherently Avatar focused, like a 100-Year War kind of story kind of would be, I'm guessing, as a kind of war story more being a thing, you have to make the story like interesting enough to kind of justify why you're telling it and kind of not being Avatar focused. Let's see. Let's see. This is an interesting kind of thing. The reason why female avatars are bisexual is to avoid childbirth, as the pain of childbirth will push them into the defense mechanism avatar state. What do you think of that theory? It's an interesting one. Definitely. That kind of feels a little bit like kind of referencing Naruto, the idea of like the dangerous time for female Jinchurikis in Naruto is when they're giving birth, and that's when there's a massive risk to containing the kind of tail beast they have inside them. that might be a similar thing. They probably need to confirm that to kind of be the case. This is where we get into the idea of like Kiyoshi and her daughter Coco. Like, is that still canon? Is that an adopted daughter thing? Like, they just need to confirm more stuff about Avatar families, kind of ultimately. But I suppose, yeah, with everything we know so far, like, they have mostly avoided like addressing the idea of like a female avatar who directly has a child. But I wonder, is that actually a thing though? It's something that feels like it should be referenced potentially in some of these books, but let's see if they ever get to it. Okay, let's see. Is this the quote here? Alexandria Monique, artist, sending off pages to Diana Souza, who is that? Did we get confirmation on who the artist is? Writer, colorist. Because typically, doesn't Alexandria Monique do her own coloring? So I don't know. Is this maybe a thing that they've done here? Of like, have they brought in a colorist to help things along? Maybe. Because I don't think they ever specifically mentioned a specific colorist. Because they were saying like the creative team is what, Kiku Hughes. Is that correct? I think so. Doubting myself now. I think anyway it was Kiku Hughes writing and Alexandria Monique on art. But usually when there is a colorist they would say that. So I don't know. This might be a newish thing. But I might be completely misremembering or assuming something there. Is this always done at once? I'm not really sure. But at least, at the very least, it's the idea of like progress for sure. Completed pages by the line artist being sent off to the colorist is a good thing. What number those pages are out of 72, I suppose, is the big question. We know she had at least, like 6, 7 done at the time of the Comic-Con last year. We'll see what's happened at this point. But yeah, it does feel like we need to come out of Comic-Con with a date for that book. If they don't mention it, I can see there being a little bit of a social media meltdown about it. Like in the same way that there was like last year when they didn't mention it at San Diego Comic-Con, and then they had to basically, I felt like they had to say something at New York. Now there's been issues. I hope they don't do another ignoring it for one convention to announce for the next one. That theory is interesting. Kyoshi wrote a secret manual about her immortality from Lao Ge in case the Avatar needed to live a longer life to protect the world. It was passed to her family, then to Roku, but Roku wasn't interested. But his daughter Rina used it to live longer. Um, it's certainly a way to explain away some of the timeline shenanigans going on with the families. But I'd be surprised if that was in any way the thing. Um, yeah, New York Comic Con. There should be. There's been pretty consistently always a panel at New York Comic Con. When we're talking about that point of the year, everything will have been out already. A lot depends on what they do or don't say at San Diego, because the core comic still wouldn't be out, basically confirmed, and we'd probably be thinking of what's the next Korra comic. But it feels like that's a crazy thing to even think of right now when it's so up in the air. But maybe it is far enough along where they can say what's next. But I'd be surprised if they're ready for that. So I don't know. They might not have anything, but at the same time, I don't know. Do we all assume that Dark Horse probably have bigger plans with Avatar Studios to be ready for like 2020, like late 2025, 2026, to coincide with the animated stuff? Because that's always been my thing here is surely when we get the big stuff, the comics are also going to be doing a bit more at the same time, like prequel comic to the movie type thing, opening the door to, okay, we've covered the Aang and Co as adults. Now can the comics cover the characters as adults going forward? That sort of thing. Yeah, last 10 years for Avatar. The gap period here between Korra and the new stuff still in the future has been, it's been tricky, definitely. There's been good years. Like, I think the year the first Kyoshi novel came out was very good because I think there was something special about that novel in particular. But I would also say that, like, post Korra is also like the transition of the comics away from the super important stories to gradually becoming what they are now. So the best years have been sort of like novel plus like the years where there's been maybe 2 or 3 comics, like, oh, a part of Imbalance plus a part of like Runes of the Empire or something like that. But that's still like, the year was great because we got like 3-4 books. That's the kind of tricky thing. And then yeah, that's a big thing for me as well. It's like, are the comics like almost like even allowed to cover stuff that isn't ATLA or Korra? Like, I'd really like to know if that actually is a thing they have in place, because if there's no issue with that, then I almost feel like what if they've been doing, not doing a Kyoshi comic? Like, that's kind of the solution to their problem, is that like you now have the door open to like Kyoshi comics, Yang Chen comics, both of which I think people would really like. But I don't know. It's confusing because I'd say part of the problem is that they probably want to do an Avatar Studios project about Kyoshi, but it's probably Project 5-6, and that will be many years into the future, but it means for all of those years they can't do more with Kyoshi because it might get in the way. And it just highlights that I think everyone kind of is in agreement that, like, the decision to move away from the comic trilogies in the year they did it comes across as pretty crazy now, given how long it's taking for this stuff to come out. And probably the high likelihood that, like, are we expecting them to really in any way cross over in any way with the comic stuff that much? And to the point where, like, if they'd done 2 or 3 more comics, that it would have really confused production on that stuff. I don't think so, really. Because it does feel like the only thing that they really need to explain from the comics is probably Ki, and they probably have to have some sort of a thing to be like, oh, here's why Zuko's mom is back. They're the kind of, like, real main things that, like, feel like people will be confused if you don't explain them from the comics. Everything else I feel you can get away with as just new people being introduced to these concepts at different times, but those things are like, okay, they need an immediate answer, I suppose. But I suppose we have to see what the first movie is to make that judgment, I suppose, properly. But I do have a feeling we probably will all be going, yeah, if this was the plot, I don't know why you needed to stop comic trilogies in, like, 2020 to stop yourself from being confused. Like, I think it's going to be the case where we're all like, wait, there was no reason you couldn't have done Avatar comic trilogy number 7, 8, and probably even 9 in the years in between Avatar Studios being announced and where we are now. Like, you didn't have to do this whole, oh, we're switching to one-shots situation. Because, like, we're already expecting there to be a, like, what? Like, 8-year gap, I think, based on if the rumored ages are correct. It's going to be, like, 8 years. That's a pretty big gap to kind of cover. But, yeah, I'm probably going to wrap up the stream. So, does anyone have any final questions before I go? And like I said, I'll have some Avatar videos for sure this week. And then, hopefully, well, I think there's definitely going to be stuff to live stream about next month. It's probably too early to do a stream specifically about the Roku novel with only, like, after release, like, a week left in the month, but maybe like a post Comic-Con thing if they actually say anything. That might be the next stream, I'm thinking, but we'll see what happens. Let's see. Are you getting an early copy of Roku or on normal release day? I'm pretty sure I will not really have any ability to get the book early. Like, it's to the point where, like, if I don't get I'll have access to the digital stuff, like, immediately, but where I'd order from in, like, years past, where I would have a chance at getting the book early, those places don't exist anymore, basically. Like I said before, I think book depositories where I ordered from, they would often ship it out early. That's why I would have the books early sometimes. I don't see that happening here. There is a chance, potentially, because it's happened basically every time with the books, is certain bookstores have the book, I think it's like 2 or 3 weeks before release, and they'll put it out early. So this is why pretty much every time a book has come out, you have people talking about it like a couple of weeks beforehand. So there's maybe the chance that someone like is like, hey, I got the book early, here it is. But, that's a lot for a book. Like, it would be great if I had it early just because of the amount of stuff I want to do to cover it. But realistically, if things just go normal, I'm probably starting to read it on midnight with the ebook, and I'm starting coverage on release date, basically. Which is a little tricky, but it's fine, basically. Any word from Magpie to when the IRO PDF might drop? Not that I've heard or seen. They said summer for it, and it was summer before wait, what was it? It was summer before almost late summer is when the fancier kind of digital releases are. So PDF first, and then the sort of online portal kind of versions of it would go up later, which is why I'm leaning towards I'm thinking it might be maybe late June, early July, but I'm not really sure. I don't know if they have a specific date in mind. The impression I got was that the second they're happy with it, they're putting it up. Because it's just they just have to update the file on DriveThruRPG and then everyone has it. But I don't know what the plan is, really. That's that. But I, in general, with early copies of stuff, unless there's specific stuff where I get reached out to by the publisher and they're like, hey, we'll give you the early review copy or something like that, or I get my application in and they approve it. I don't really have anywhere where I can potentially even get the book early from. I think I have somewhere where I can actually get a physical copy of the book they've released, but I'm not really sure. Still, it's exciting. It's a little bit stressful just with the fact that I know going into those releases of the books that it's okay, yeah, I've got 20 plus videos ahead of me on this thing. Where do I even begin? But it's so good, I the passion gets me through, that sort of thing. Once you break it down, it's I'm pretty much doing a video about a chapter every day, and that's not too bad. Let's see, do we know the Aang movie is using traditional 2D animation or 3D animation like Disney and Warner Bros. With their animated movies? It's 2D. Brian, on a interview, stressed very strongly they are doing it in 2D animation, but they are they're acknowledging the advancement of technology in animation, and so it will utilize 3D CG when required, but that it is very much the case where you would classify what they are doing as primarily 2D animation. So it's enhanced 2D animation, whatever way you want to call it. That's the situation, basically. I don't know if they have plans to do different animation styles for different projects necessarily. They'll obviously have different art styles based on what Brian said on a recent podcast about whatever project he's working on right now. But we all saw the leaked image, basically, and that was very clearly 2D. Now, admittedly, it wasn't an animation frame, but the idea is that that is realistically it's a piece of key art which is meant to look like the animation style, and it was very clearly that's Avatar's art style, pretty much. So I think that's the case. And I think if you've heard Brian in interviews, I think he is someone who very much wants to do things with 2D animation. I think I would be super surprised if we ever really got an Avatar project using 3D animation that's maybe not like a random short or something like that. Any, I think, major project for Avatar, I think, is going to be 2D animated. But we'll see what they do. But the main stuff, definitely, I think, is going to be in line with what we know. Probably will look nicer just because of how long it's been since the last Avatar animation. So yeah, like it's a key kind of month and a half, I think, coming up, because everything's coming out. Comic-Con will really tell us what's happening right now, what's happening at New York Comic-Con probably, and then will we get any more Avatar Studios information? Like, I think the big question with Avatar Studios is, like, I'd be surprised if they said too much more about the movie yet, but the real question is, when will they in any way announce the first animated series for Avatar Studios? That's probably the big question. If they have a plan to be like movie and then a few months later the first series, that series needs to be announced at some point soon. That's the situation there. I'm kind of almost thinking, like, is there a chance that, like, Janet Varney actually just does something like she did a few years ago, and, like, she made the announcement that the first movie will be about Aang and friends? Like, that was literally the announcement. She said that. Will she maybe do something like that for the first series as, like, a very minor announcement? I think that would be kind of interesting. Let's see, San Diego Comic-Con 2024. July 25th to 28th. So, like, we're pretty much exactly a month away, because, like, I think the preview night is the 24th. So technically the con is going to start like a month from today. I'm guessing our panel would be on the Saturday, probably. I think it's usually Saturday. Sometimes Sunday, but I think it's usually Saturday. And yeah, schedule I don't think is up yet, but it should be in the next couple of weeks. Okay, so it was off with that. It's preview night Wednesday, Thursday. Yeah, okay. So yeah, no schedule yet, but it's usually kind of end of the month into start of next month, obviously. I would say I feel like San Diego Comic-Con has been pretty disappointing most of the last couple of years. I think more has happened at the New York Comic-Cons. So I think we're in need of a good SDCC panel. The problem might just be the timing with where things are in production. Of like, the panel will be before Bounty Hunter the T-Brewer comes out. It'll be like days after the first Roku novel has come out. It may or may not be a good time. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, gonna wrap up the stream there. So yeah, like I said, next stream will probably be towards the end of next month, probably to cover what happens at Comic-Con, because we'll be only right at the start of Roku coverage, because it'll be like a few days after that. So yeah, there should be a stream next month. But as ever, you know, if there is massive news that drops between now and then, I'll hop on and we can do a like instant reaction type stream like this. But otherwise, yes, everyone, thanks for coming out to the stream to cover the preview excerpt for Reckoning of Roku. And I'll for sure have an Avatar video up tomorrow, like I said, covering the Rebels and Refugees adventure for the Legends RPG. But yeah, thanks for watching the stream, everyone. Bye.